I knew something was wrong the moment my mother called to invite us to Sunday dinner. Her voice was too sweet, too carefully casual, like she was reading from a script someone had written for her. "Darling, I was thinking it would be lovely if you and Sloane could come for dinner this weekend," she said, using that particular tone that meant she wanted something. "Your father and I haven't seen you in weeks, and we'd love to catch up. Just a simple family meal." Simple family meal. Right. Nothing in the Whitmore family was ever simple, and family meals were typically elaborate productions designed to showcase my mother's entertaining skills and my father's wine collection to whatever important guests they were trying to impress. A casual Sunday dinner invitation was completely out of character. "Who else is coming?" I asked suspiciously. "Just family," my mother said quickly. Too quickly. "You, Sloane, your father and me, your brother Dashiell and his wife." "Oh, and your grandfather specifically asked that you come. You know how he gets when you skip family gatherings." My grandfather. That was the hook she knew I couldn't resist. Grandpa Sterling was 86 years old, sharp as ever despite his age, and the only member of my family who'd shown any genuine interest in my life since I'd come out 2 years ago. If he wanted to see me, I'd be there, even if it meant enduring whatever awkwardness my parents had planned. "What time?" I asked, resigned to my fate. 6 o'clock. "And Fallon, please dress nicely. You know how your father is about appearances." After I hung up, Sloane looked at me from where she was curled up on our couch reading, her green eyes questioning. "So? What's the verdict?" "Sunday dinner at my parents' house," I said, flopping down beside her. "My mom's being weird about it, which means they're definitely planning something. But my grandfather asked for me specifically, so I kind of have to go." Sloane marked her place in her book and set it aside. Define weird. Too cheerful, too casual, too insistent that it's just family, but also specifically mentioning that you're invited. My mother never invites you to things. She usually pretends you don't exist, and then acts surprised when you show up. "Maybe she's trying to be better," Sloane suggested, though her tone made it clear she didn't believe it any more than I did. "My mother doesn't do better," I said. "She does strategic. Whatever this dinner is, she has an agenda, and we're going to walk right into it because I can't say no when my grandfather's involved." Sloane was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "We don't have to go. You can visit your grandfather another time, on your own terms. If your mom's planning some kind of ambush, we don't have to participate." "I know," I said, grateful for the out she was offering, even though we both knew I wouldn't take it. "But if I don't show up, it'll just confirm whatever narrative they're telling themselves about me, that I'm being difficult or rebellious or choosing you over family. At least if we go, we can control the situation somewhat." "Can we, though?" Sloane asked. "Control the situation? Or are we just walking into a trap with our eyes open?" I didn't have a good answer to that. Sunday arrived gray and cold, a typical November afternoon in Connecticut. Sloane and I dressed carefully for dinner, me in tailored black pants and a silk blouse that would meet my mother's standards, Sloane in a burgundy dress that looked elegant and professional and completely appropriate. We were armoring up, preparing for battle disguised as a family meal. My parents lived in Westport, in a massive colonial house that had been in the Whitmore family for 3 generations. Growing up, I'd loved that house. The grand staircase, the library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the sprawling lawn perfect for childhood games. Now it just felt like a museum of expectations I'd failed to meet, every room filled with portraits of successful Whitmore ancestors whose accomplishments I'd never match. We pulled up the circular driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. Punctuality was non-negotiable in the Whitmore family. My father's BMW was there, along with my brother's Tesla, and there, parked off to the side, was a Mercedes I didn't recognize. "Whose car is that?" Sloane asked, echoing my own concern. "No idea. But so much for just family." My mother answered the door wearing a cocktail dress and her pearl necklace, which confirmed this was definitely not a casual dinner. "Fallon, sweetheart, you made it. And Sloane, how lovely to see you." The warmth in her voice was so artificial it made my teeth hurt. "Hi, Mom," I said, accepting her air kiss near my cheek. "You didn't mention we were dressing up." "Oh, it's not dressed up, just nice," my mother said, leading us into the foyer. "You know your father likes us to make an effort. Can I take your coats?" We handed over our jackets and followed her into the living room, where my father stood by the fireplace with a martini, talking to my brother Dashiell and his wife Portia. And there, sitting in the wingback chair that was usually reserved for my grandfather, was a woman I'd never seen before, mid-50s maybe, wearing an expensive-looking suit and an expression of professional interest. Fallon! My father's voice boomed across the room. There you are. Come in, come in. I want you to meet someone. This is Dr. Constance Aldridge. She's a family therapist who specializes in, well, we'll get into that over dinner. Dr. Aldridge, this is my daughter Fallon, and her friend, Sloane, friend. He'd called Sloane my friend. We'd been together for 3 years, lived together for 18 months, and he still couldn't bring himself to say girlfriend. I felt Sloane tense beside me, but she kept her expression neutral and extended her hand to Dr. Aldridge. Nice to meet you, she said politely. Dr. Aldridge shook her hand with a sympathetic smile that made my skin crawl. Lovely to meet you both. Your parents have told me so much about you, Fallon. I'm sure they have, I said, my voice tight. I turned to my mother, who was suddenly very interested in straightening the flowers on the mantel. Mom, can I talk to you in the kitchen for a minute? Dinner's almost ready, sweetheart. Why don't we all sit down? Now, please, I said, and walked toward the kitchen without waiting for her response. My mother followed reluctantly, and the moment we were alone, I turned on her. What the hell is this? You ambushed us with a therapist? It's not an ambush, my mother said defensively. We're concerned about you, Fallon. This lifestyle you're living. These choices you're making. We thought talking to a professional might help you work through whatever you're going through. Whatever I'm going through, I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I'm gay, Mom. That's not something I'm going through. That's who I am. And bringing a conversion therapist to Sunday dinner is not concern. It's homophobia, dressed up as love. Dr. Aldridge is not a conversion therapist, my mother said, though she couldn't quite meet my eyes. She's a family counselor who helps people navigate complex identity issues and relationship dynamics. Your father and I just thought you could ambush me and Sloane, trap us in a situation where we'd have to sit through some therapeutic intervention designed to convince me I'm broken and need fixing. That's what you thought. Fallon, please. Where's Grandpa? I interrupted. You said he asked for me specifically. I want to see him. My mother looked uncomfortable. He's upstairs resting. He doesn't know about Dr. Aldridge. We thought it would be better to handle this ourselves first. Of course they hadn't told him, because my grandfather would have shut this whole thing down immediately, and my parents knew it. I walked out of the kitchen and headed straight for the stairs, ignoring my mother calling after me. Sloane caught up with me on the landing, her face worried. What's happening? Are we leaving? Not yet, I said. First, I need to talk to my grandfather. He's the only person in this house with any sense. Grandpa Sterling's suite was on the 2nd floor, a series of rooms that had been converted for him after my grandmother died, and he couldn't manage the stairs to his old bedroom. I knocked gently on his door and heard his gruff voice call out, Come in, come in. I'm not dead yet. He was sitting in his favorite chair by the window, a book open on his lap and reading glasses perched on his nose. When he saw me, his weathered face broke into a genuine smile. Fallon, sweetheart, there you are. I was starting to think you'd forgotten about your old grandfather. Never, I said, crossing the room to hug him. He smelled like old books and peppermint, familiar and comforting. You asked Mom to invite me for dinner? I did indeed, he said, then noticed Sloane standing hesitantly in the doorway. And you must be Sloane. Come in, child. Let me get a look at the woman who's stolen my granddaughter's heart. Sloane came forward, offering her hand, but Grandpa Sterling pulled her into a hug instead. We're not formal in this family, he said. Well, we are, but that's a bad habit we should break. Sit down, both of you. Tell me what's got Fallon looking like she wants to murder someone. I sat on the ottoman near his chair, Sloane settling beside me. Did you know Mom and Dad invited a therapist to dinner? Some specialist in complex identity issues who's supposed to help me work through being gay? Grandpa Sterling's expression darkened. They did what? She's downstairs right now. Dr. Constance Aldridge. Mom claims she's not a conversion therapist, but let's be honest about what this is. It's an ambush designed to make me feel broken and ashamed, with a professional there to validate their concern. Those idiots, Grandpa Sterling muttered, pushing himself up from his chair with more energy than I'd seen from him in months. I specifically told your mother to invite you for a nice family dinner so I could meet Sloane properly, and she turns it into an intervention? Unacceptable. Grandpa, you don't have to. Don't have to what? Stand up for my granddaughter? Tell my son and daughter-in-law that they're behaving like prejudiced fools? That's exactly what I have to do, Fallon. Someone in this family needs to have some sense and basic human decency. He was already heading toward the door, moving with determination despite his age. Sloane and I exchanged glances and hurried after him. Downstairs, everyone was gathered in the dining room, apparently waiting for us to return before starting dinner. My father looked annoyed at the delay, my mother anxious, Dashiell bored, and Dr. Aldridge professionally patient. They all looked up as Grandpa Sterling made his entrance, me and Sloane trailing behind him. "Sterling," my father said, surprise evident in his voice. "We didn't expect you to join us for dinner. I thought you were resting." "I was resting until I learned that you'd turned a family dinner into an ambush," Grandpa Sterling said, his voice sharp. "Dr. Aldridge, is it? I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Your services won't be needed this evening. Dr. Aldridge looked to my parents uncertainly. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore? Dad, this doesn't concern you," my father said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he wanted to dismiss someone. "This is about Fallon and helping her make healthy choices about her future." "Healthy choices?" Grandpa Sterling's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You mean making her ashamed of who she is? Convincing her that loving another woman is something that needs to be fixed? That's not healthy, David. That's bigotry." "We're not bigots," my mother protested. "We're concerned parents who want what's best for our daughter." "What's best for your daughter is accepting her exactly as she is," Grandpa Sterling interrupted. "Fallon is gay. That's not a phase, not a choice, not something that can be therapied away. It's who she is. And Sloane," he turned to smile at her, "is clearly someone who makes Fallon happy. I can see it in the way my granddaughter looks at her." "That should be enough for you." "With all due respect, Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Aldridge interjected carefully, "sometimes family members need support in understanding and processing significant life changes. My practice doesn't advocate for changing anyone's sexual orientation, but rather helping families navigate." "I don't care about your practice," Grandpa Sterling said bluntly. "I care about my granddaughter, who deserves to have dinner with her family without being made to feel like she's defective. Dr. Aldridge, I'm sure you're very good at what you do, but you're not needed here. My son will compensate you for your time, of course." My father's face had gone red. "Dad, you can't just—" "I can, and I am," Grandpa Sterling said. "This is still partially my house, if you recall. I may have signed over the deed, but I have rights here. And I'm exercising my right to say that Dr. Aldridge needs to leave, and we're going to have a nice family dinner where we treat Fallon and Sloane with the respect they deserve." The room fell silent. Dr. Aldridge looked extremely uncomfortable. My parents looked furious and embarrassed, and Dashiell looked like he wished he was anywhere else. Sloane's hand found mine, squeezing gently. Finally, Dr. Aldridge stood. "Perhaps this isn't the right time," she said diplomatically. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, we can reschedule when circumstances are more conducive to productive conversation." My mother showed her out, apologizing profusely. My father stood rigid by the fireplace, his jaw clenched, and Grandpa Sterling settled into his seat at the head of the dining table like nothing unusual had happened. "Now then," he said cheerfully, "shall we eat? I'm starving, and I want to hear all about how you two met." Fallon's been disappointingly vague in her emails. The dinner that followed was one of the most awkward meals of my life. My parents barely spoke except for terse requests to pass dishes. Dashiell and Portia made uncomfortable small talk about their jobs. But Grandpa Sterling held court at the head of the table, asking Sloane about her work as a civil rights attorney, telling embarrassing stories about my childhood, and generally acting like this was exactly the pleasant family dinner he'd intended. "So Sloane," Grandpa Sterling said over dessert, "Fallon tells me you're from Oregon originally. What brought you to Connecticut?" "Law school at Yale," Sloane said, relaxing slightly as she realized she had at least one ally at this table. "I got recruited by Brennan and Associates after graduation. They do a lot of work in employment discrimination and civil liberties cases." "Important work," Grandpa Sterling said approvingly. "The world needs more people willing to fight for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular." He shot a pointed look at my parents. "Some people are too worried about appearances and what the neighbors think to stand up for basic human decency." "Dad," my father said warningly. "Oh, don't dad me, David. You're 62 years old. I'm not going to coddle you." Grandpa Sterling turned back to Sloane. "Tell me, what's your take on the current state of LGBTQ rights in this country? Are we making progress, or just going in circles?" And Sloane, bless her, launched into an intelligent analysis of recent court cases and legislative changes, clearly comfortable talking about her passion. My grandfather listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, while my parents sat there looking like they'd swallowed something sour. When dinner finally ended, My mother announced she had a headache and disappeared upstairs. My father retreated to his study. Dashiell and Portia made hasty excuses and left, which left me, Sloane, and Grandpa Sterling in the living room. "I'm sorry about tonight," I told my grandfather. "You wanted a nice family dinner, and instead it turned into a disaster." "Not a disaster," he corrected. "A necessary confrontation that's been brewing for 2 years. Your parents needed to understand that their behavior is unacceptable, and I'm apparently the only one willing to tell them that." "Why did you stand up for us?" Sloane asked quietly. "Not to be rude, but you're from a different generation. Most people your age, most people my age are set in their ways and too proud to admit when they're wrong," Grandpa Sterling finished. "But I've lived 86 years, Sloane. I've seen enough of the world to know that love is rare and precious, and it doesn't matter what form it takes. I've also made enough mistakes to recognize when someone is making one right in front of me. My son is about to lose his daughter over pride and prejudice, and I'll be damned if I stand by and let that happen." "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're the only family member who's actually tried to understand." "Well, technically I'm not the only one," Grandpa Sterling said with a mysterious smile. "There's someone else who wants to meet you both, someone who's been waiting a long time for the right moment." Before I could ask what he meant, there was a knock at the front door. Grandpa Sterling pushed himself up from his chair. "That'll be her now. I invited her for after-dinner drinks, figuring the timing would be better once your parents' ambush had played out." He opened the door to reveal a woman I'd never seen before, early 60s maybe, with short silver hair and kind eyes, wearing jeans and a sweater that suggested she had no interest in impressing anyone. "Fallon, Sloane," Grandpa Sterling said warmly, "I'd like you to meet someone very important. This is my daughter, Cecilia, your aunt." I stared at him in shock. "I don't have an aunt. My father's an only child." "That's what he's told you," Cecilia said, stepping inside and removing her coat. "And technically it's true in the sense that he doesn't acknowledge having a sister, but biologically speaking, I very much exist." "I don't understand," I said, looking between my grandfather and this stranger claiming to be my aunt. "Sit down," Grandpa Sterling said gently. "This is a long story, and you deserve to hear all of it." We settled back in the living room, and my grandfather began to speak. 34 years ago, when your father was in his late 20s, and Cecilia was 25, she came home from college and told us she was gay, that she'd met a woman, fallen in love, and wanted to bring her girlfriend home to meet the family. Your grandmother, my beloved wife Margaret, did not take it well. She was from a very traditional background, very concerned with appearances and family reputation. She gave Cecilia an ultimatum: end the relationship and marry appropriately, or leave the family. Cecilia picked up the story, her voice matter of fact, despite the pain the memory clearly held. "I chose love. I chose Diane, the woman I'd fallen for, and my mother made good on her threat. She cut me off completely, told everyone I'd died in a car accident abroad, and forbade anyone in the family from contacting me. Your father, my brother David, went along with it. He was always more concerned with Mom's approval than with standing up for what was right. I'm ashamed to say I didn't fight hard enough for my daughter," Grandpa Sterling said, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have stood up to Margaret, should have refused to let her drive Cecilia away, but I was a coward, and I convinced myself that Cecilia would come to her senses and come home. By the time I realized that wasn't going to happen, that Margaret's hatred was permanent and destructive, years had passed. Cecilia had built a whole life without us. I've been living in Vermont for 3 decades, Cecilia said. Diane and I got married as soon as it was legal. We ran a bed and breakfast, raised 2 kids, your cousins, though you've never met them. I made peace with losing my family of origin because I built a new family, one that actually loved and accepted me. So why now? I asked. Why reach out after all these years? Because your grandmother died 5 years ago, Grandpa Sterling said. And without her toxicity poisoning everything, I had the chance to reconnect with my daughter. Cecilia and I have been rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. And when you came out 2 years ago, when I saw David and Caroline starting to treat you the same way Margaret treated Cecilia, I knew I had to do something different this time. I wasn't going to stand by and watch history repeat itself. I asked Dad to wait before introducing us, Cecilia explained. I wanted you to have time to find your footing, to build your own life and relationship without the weight of family drama on top of it. But when he told me about tonight, about your parents planning this therapy ambush, I knew it was time. You need to know you're not alone, Fallon. You have family who understands what you're going through, because we've lived it. I was crying now, overwhelmed by the revelation. I have an aunt, and cousins, a whole branch of family I never knew existed. You do, Cecilia said gently, and we'd love to get to know you and Sloane, if you're interested. No pressure, no expectations, just an open door to family who won't try to change you, or fix you, or make you feel broken. Sloane was crying too, her hand tight in mine. This is real? She asked. You're really reaching out because you understand, not because you want something from us? It's really real, Cecilia confirmed. I know what it's like to lose your family over who you love. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, especially not my own niece. If I can help you avoid some of what I went through, or at least help you know you're not alone in it, then that's what I want to do. We talked for hours, Cecilia telling stories about her life in Vermont, her wife Diane, who was apparently hilarious and ran the best bed and breakfast in New England, my cousins Rowan and Iris, who were both in their 20s and doing interesting things with their lives. She showed us photos on her phone, and I stared at these strangers who were apparently my family, trying to reconcile decades of believing my father was an only child with this new reality. Does my dad know you're here? I asked eventually. He does now, Cecilia said. I stopped by his study before coming to find you. We had a conversation, not a pleasant one. He's angry that Dad invited me, furious that we're corrupting you with our presence. He threatened to throw me out, actually. And I told him that if he did, I'd be leaving with you, Grandpa Sterling added. That I'd sell my portion of this house and move to Vermont to be with the family members who actually know how to love each other unconditionally. That seemed to give him pause. I can't believe this, I said, still trying to process everything. My whole life you've just been gone, erased, and now you're here. And it's because my parents tried to pull the exact same thing on me that they did to you. History has a way of repeating itself until someone breaks the pattern, Cecilia said. I'm hoping that having me here, showing you that it's possible to survive family rejection and build a happy life anyway, might give you the strength to stand firm in who you are. Not that you seem to need it. Bringing Sloane tonight despite knowing your parents might be difficult shows you've already got a strong backbone. That's all Grandpa's influence, I said, smiling at my grandfather through my tears. He's the one who taught me to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. I taught both my children that, Grandpa Sterling said sadly, but only one of them listened. We stayed until late, trading stories and getting to know each other. Cecilia told us about coming out in the 80s, about the AIDS crisis and losing friends, about the slow progress toward marriage equality, and how it felt to finally legally marry Diane after 20 years together. She talked about the grief of losing her family, but also the joy of building a chosen family, of creating a life that was authentic rather than acceptable. I won't lie to you, Cecilia said, as the night wound down. Losing my family was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. There were years where I was angry, where I grieved what could have been, but I also found freedom in it. Freedom to be completely myself without worrying about judgment or disapproval. And I found people who loved me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. That's worth something. When Sloane and I finally left around midnight, my parents still hiding in different parts of the house, I felt completely different than when we'd arrived. We'd walked in expecting an ambush, and we'd gotten one. But we'd also gained an entire branch of family we didn't know existed. That was the weirdest night of my life, Sloane said as we drove home. We got ambushed by a therapist and gained a long-lost aunt in the same evening. Welcome to the Whitmore family, I said. We're dysfunctional in the most dramatic ways possible. Your grandfather is amazing, Sloane said. And your aunt, God, can you imagine living through what she went through? Being completely erased from family history? I don't have to imagine it, I said quietly. That's exactly what my parents would do to me if they could. Tell everyone I'd moved away or died or just stopped existing. Erase me rather than deal with the embarrassment of having a gay daughter. They can't erase you, Sloane said fiercely. You have Grandpa Sterling, and now you have Cecilia and her family. And you have me. We're building our own family, one that doesn't require you to hide or change or pretend to be someone you're not. The next week, my father called to inform me that I was no longer welcome at family events, that my choice to align myself with Cecilia against him and my mother made it clear where my loyalties lay, and he couldn't have that kind of divisiveness at family gatherings. So you're cutting me off, I said flatly, like your mother did to Cecilia. This is different, my father insisted. Cecilia made choices that embarrassed the family. You're making the same mistakes, and I won't enable that. The only embarrassment here is you, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. You're repeating the exact same pattern that destroyed your relationship with your sister, and you can't even see it. But that's fine, Dad. If you need to cut me off to maintain your delusion that you're right, go ahead. I have family who actually loves me. I'll be fine. I hung up before he could respond and waited for the devastation to hit. But instead, I felt oddly relieved. The waiting was over. The ambush had happened. Battle lines had been drawn, and I knew exactly where I stood. Grandpa Sterling called an hour later. Your father told me what he said. I want you to know that he doesn't speak for me. You are always welcome in my home, and I'm working on separating my living situation from your parents' house. I won't live somewhere that my granddaughter isn't welcome. Grandpa, you don't have to move because of me. I'm not moving because of you, he corrected. I'm moving because I won't enable my son's bigotry by staying under his roof. Cecilia has invited me to Vermont, and I'm seriously considering it. Get out of this stuffy Connecticut town, spend my remaining years somewhere beautiful with family who actually knows how to love each other. Doesn't sound like a bad retirement plan. 2 weeks later, Sloane and I drove to Vermont to meet the rest of my newfound family. Cecilia's bed and breakfast was exactly as advertised. Charming, cozy, situated in a small town with mountain views and fall foliage that looked like a postcard. Diane turned out to be warm and funny, immediately pulling us into hugs and telling embarrassing stories about Cecilia. My cousins Rowan and Iris were welcoming and curious, asking questions about our lives and sharing stories about growing up with 2 moms in a small Vermont town. It wasn't always easy, Rowan admitted over dinner that first night. Small town, same-sex parents, definitely got some bullying growing up. But Mom and Mama always made sure we knew we were loved exactly as we were. That foundation made dealing with external judgment easier. Plus we had each other, Iris added, and a whole community of chosen family. Other queer folks, allies, people who became family because they chose to show up for us. It's different than blood family in some ways, but it's real. That weekend, Grandpa Sterling called to tell me he'd decided to take Cecilia up on her offer. He was selling his portion of the Connecticut house to my father and moving to Vermont permanently. I'm 86 years old, he said. I don't have time left to waste living somewhere I'm not happy, with people who don't share my values. Your aunt has a cottage on her property that needs a tenant, and I need a fresh start. Seems like good timing. I'm going to miss having you nearby, I said, though I was happy for him. Vermont's only a few hours away, he pointed out. You and Sloane can visit any time. And honestly, Fallon, I think you two should consider relocating as well. Connecticut isn't giving you anything except proximity to people who make you miserable. What's keeping you there? It was a good question. Sloane's law firm had offices in multiple states. My job as a graphic designer was fully remote. We had friends in Connecticut, sure, but no real roots beyond geography. What were we holding on to? Think about it, Grandpa Sterling said. No pressure. But there's a whole life waiting for you here, with family who actually wants you around. That's worth considering. Sloane and I talked about it on the drive home, circling around the idea carefully. I like Vermont, Sloane said. I like your family there. And honestly, I'm tired of running into your parents around town. Tired of the awkwardness with mutual friends who don't know whether to invite us to things if your family will be there. A fresh start sounds appealing. It does, I agreed. But it feels like running away, like letting them win. Or, Sloane countered, it's choosing happiness over stubbornness. Choosing to build a life near family who supports us instead of staying close to family who rejects us just to prove a point. That's not losing, Fallon. That's winning. She was right, of course. And 3 months later, we packed up our Connecticut apartment and moved to Vermont. Sloane got a position at a civil rights nonprofit based in Burlington. I kept my remote design job and picked up freelance work from local businesses. We rented a small house in the same town as Cecilia's bed and breakfast, close enough to be part of the daily rhythm of life, but far enough to have our own space. Grandpa Sterling settled into his cottage and declared it the best decision he'd made in decades. He had dinner with Cecilia's family several times a week, had found a weekly poker game with other retirees in town, and seemed happier than I'd ever seen him. My parents, predictably, were furious about the move. My mother called crying, accusing me of choosing strangers over my real family. My father sent a cold email informing me that my trust fund would be frozen until I came to my senses. Dashiell forwarded a message from our parents asking him to talk sense into me, which he apparently ignored entirely. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by family who loved me unconditionally. Cecilia and Diane had us over for dinners and game nights. Rowan and Iris became not just cousins but genuine friends. Grandpa Sterling told stories about family history that my father had never bothered to share, filling in gaps in my understanding of where I came from. And Sloane thrived in Vermont, finding community and purpose in her work and in our chosen family. Watching her laugh at Diane's terrible jokes, seeing her help Cecilia with bed and breakfast bookkeeping, witnessing her bond with my cousins, it all felt right in a way Connecticut never had. A year after we moved, Sloane and I got engaged. We'd talked about marriage before, but never seriously. Both of us still processing family trauma and uncertain about making big commitments while everything felt unstable. But surrounded by family who celebrated our relationship rather than trying to destroy it, getting married felt natural and right. We told Cecilia and Diane first, over Sunday dinner at the bed and breakfast. They both cried happy tears and immediately started planning engagement celebrations. Grandpa Sterling toasted us with expensive whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. Rowan and Iris demanded to be bridesmaids. "Have you told your parents?" Cecilia asked gently, after the initial excitement settled. "Not yet," I admitted. "I'm not sure I'm going to. They made it clear I'm not part of their family anymore. Why would I share this with them?" "Because they're still your parents," Cecilia said. "And because cutting them out entirely, refusing to give them any opportunities to change or grow, makes you just as rigid as they are. Trust me, I spent years being angry at our mother, refusing to reach out even when Dad suggested it. And then she died, and I never got the chance to see if she might have changed. I don't want that for you." "Your aunt's right," Grandpa Sterling added. "Your father is being a stubborn fool, but he's still your father. And people can change, even when it seems impossible. I've seen it happen." So I called my parents, my hand shaking as I dialed. My mother answered, her voice cautious. "Fallon? Hi, Mom. I wanted to tell you something. Sloane and I are engaged. We're getting married next summer in Vermont." Silence on the other end. Then, "I see. Well, that's certainly a choice." "It's not a choice, Mom. It's my life. My happy, fulfilling life with someone I love, surrounded by family who supports us. I'm calling because despite everything, you're still my mother, and I thought you should know. Your father won't approve," she said, which wasn't exactly surprising. "I'm not asking for his approval," I said. "I'm just sharing information. You can choose to be part of this or not, but either way, it's happening. The wedding is June 15th at Cecilia's property. You're both invited if you want to come, but if you can't be supportive and respectful, I'd rather you didn't." Another long silence. Then my mother said something that surprised me. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," I said. "The invitation stands either way. Let me know." She didn't promise anything, but she didn't outright refuse either, which felt like progress. Planning the wedding was joyful and easy in ways I'd never expected. Cecilia and Diane offered their property for the ceremony, a beautiful meadow with mountain views that took my breath away. Sloane's parents flew in from Oregon, warm and enthusiastic and immediately bonding with my Vermont family. Friends came from Connecticut and beyond, celebrating with us without any of the tension that would have existed if my parents had been orchestrating things. The only shadow over everything was the question of whether my parents would come. My mother had said she'd think about it, but weeks passed without any word. Finally, 2 months before the wedding, I got a letter in the mail. Actual handwritten letter, not email or text. "Dear Fallon," it read, "I've been doing a lot of thinking since your engagement announcement, and I've been talking to someone, a real therapist, not the kind your father wanted to bring to dinner that night. She's been helping me understand that my discomfort with your sexuality is my problem, not yours. That my fear of what other people think has been hurting my daughter, and that's unacceptable. I can't promise I'll be perfect at this. I can't promise I won't make mistakes or say the wrong thing sometimes. But I'm trying to do better, to be better, and I would very much like to come to your wedding, if the invitation still stands. I understand if you don't want me there. I've given you plenty of reasons not to trust me, but I'm asking for a chance to show you that I'm changing. Love, Mom." I cried reading it, a mess of emotion I couldn't fully parse. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't undo 2 years of rejection and hurt, but it was something, an acknowledgement, an effort, a tentative step toward reconciliation. "What do you think?" I asked Sloane, showing her the letter. "I think it's your decision," Sloane said carefully. "She's your mother. If you want to give her another chance, I'll support that. If you don't, I'll support that too." I want to, I said slowly. I want to believe people can change, that families can heal even from really deep wounds. But I'm also scared. Scared she'll show up and make the wedding about her, or say something hurtful, or bring my father, who definitely hasn't changed. So we set boundaries, Sloane suggested. She can come, but alone. No dad, unless he's also done the work to change. She can come as a guest, not a participant in the ceremony. She doesn't get special mother of the bride privileges unless she earns them by showing sustained change, not just one letter. We protect ourselves while leaving the door open. It was good advice. I called my mother and told her she was welcome to attend as a guest, that I appreciated her letter and her efforts to change, but that I needed to see sustained evidence of that change before we could rebuild a real relationship. She agreed without argument, which itself felt like growth. The wedding day arrived sunny and perfect, the Vermont mountains providing a stunning backdrop. Sloane looked incredible in a fitted cream suit, and I wore a flowing white dress that made me feel like myself. Cecilia walked me down the aisle, Grandpa Sterling officiating the ceremony with joy and humor and genuine love. And there, sitting in the back row, was my mother, alone, as requested, crying quietly but smiling too, watching her daughter marry the woman she loved. She didn't make a scene, didn't try to insert herself or make demands, just attended, witnessed, and afterward approached us tentatively to offer congratulations. "You both look beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy for you, Fallon. Truly. Thank you for coming," I said carefully. "It means a lot." "Thank you for inviting me," she replied. "I know I didn't deserve it, but I'm grateful anyway." It wasn't a full reconciliation. My father was still completely estranged. My mother's change was too new and fragile to fully trust, but it was a beginning, a possibility, a crack in the wall that had separated us. The reception was everything I'd hoped for. Good food, better music, dancing and laughter and celebration with people who genuinely loved us. Grandpa Sterling gave a toast about family, both the one we're born into and the one we choose, about the courage it takes to be yourself, and the rewards that come from surrounding yourself with people who support that choice. Cecilia and Diane danced together, 35 years of partnership evident in every movement. Rowan and Iris entertained guests with stories about us. Sloane's parents chatted warmly with my mother, who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know them. And Sloane and I danced in that meadow under string lights, surrounded by love and acceptance, and I felt grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought us there. "Thank you," I whispered to Sloane as we swayed together. "For what?" "For standing with me through all of it. The ambush dinner, the family drama, moving to Vermont, building this life. You could have walked away so many times when things got hard." "Never," Sloane said firmly. "I'm in this with you. All of it. The family who accepts us and the family who doesn't. The easy parts and the hard parts. That's what marriage is." "Yeah," I agreed. "It is." 5 years after our wedding, my mother had become a regular presence in our lives. She visited Vermont every few months, staying at Cecilia's bed and breakfast and slowly rebuilding relationships with the sister she'd helped erase and the daughter she'd almost lost. She'd left my father, which had shocked everyone, moving into her own apartment and starting the process of building a life that wasn't defined by his approval. "I wasted 35 years trying to be the perfect wife," she told me over coffee during one visit. "Trying to make your father happy, maintain appearances, live up to expectations I never even questioned. But watching you choose authenticity over approval, watching Cecilia build a beautiful life after being rejected by our family, it made me realize I could make different choices too." My father remained completely estranged, remarried to a woman who apparently shared his values and had no interest in reconciling with me. Daschle maintained minimal contact with both of us, uncomfortable with conflict and choosing to focus on his own life rather than pick sides. But I had Grandpa Sterling, still sharp and engaged at 91. I had Cecilia and Diane, who'd become as much parents to me as aunts. I had Rowan and Iris, closer than siblings. I had my mother, slowly unlearning decades of toxic beliefs and building a relationship based on who we actually were, rather than who she thought we should be. And I had Sloane, my wife and partner, and home, the person who'd stood beside me through ambush dinners and family trauma, and the hard work of building something new. That, I realized, was more than enough. That was everything. Sometimes families break and rebuild into something different, something better. Sometimes the people who were supposed to protect you fail, and you have to find protection elsewhere. Sometimes love looks nothing like what you expected, and that's okay. It's still love, still real, still worth fighting for. The ambush dinner that was supposed to shame me into hiding had instead connected me with family I didn't know existed, had catalyzed changes that brought more love into my life, not less. My grandfather's intervention that night had saved me from years of the same painful estrangement Cecilia had experienced, had given me an example of what family support could look like. And years later, sitting on Cecilia's porch with Sloane and our found family, watching the sun set over the Vermont mountains, I was grateful for all of it, even the painful parts that had brought us here, because this chosen family, this authentic life, this love that didn't require hiding or changing, was worth every difficult conversation, every severed tie, every moment of standing firm in who I was despite pressure to be someone else. My family had planned to ambush me, but my grandfather had other plans, and those other plans had changed everything. 10 years after the ambush dinner that changed everything, I stood in the same meadow where Sloane and I had gotten married, watching my grandfather's 100th birthday celebration unfold around me. He was seated in a comfortable chair someone had carried out from the house, holding court like the beloved patriarch he'd become, telling stories to a crowd of great-grandchildren who hung on his every word. Yes, great-grandchildren. Sloane and I had adopted twins 5 years ago, Mateo and Sage, now rambunctious 7-year-olds racing through the meadow with their cousins. Rowan had 2 kids of her own, and Iris had just announced she was pregnant with her first. The family that had been fractured and hidden for so long had grown and multiplied, spreading roots deep into Vermont soil. "Can you believe this?" Cecilia said, coming to stand beside me with 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one, and we clinked glasses in a silent toast. 39 years ago, Mom told me I was dead to the family, and now look at us, 4 generations, all here together. "Not all of us," I said quietly, thinking of my father who'd died 2 years earlier without ever reconciling. He'd had a heart attack at 68, sudden and final, taking with him any possibility of the apology I'd stopped hoping for, but never quite stopped wanting. "No, not all," Cecilia agreed. "David made his choices, just like my mother made hers. We can grieve what could have been while still celebrating what actually is." What actually was, I reflected, was pretty extraordinary. My mother was here, laughing with Diane about something while helping set up the dessert table. She'd become a fixture in our lives, a grandmother to our kids who showed up consistently and loved unconditionally in ways she'd never managed when I was growing up. She'd done the hard work of unlearning decades of prejudice and control, had gone to therapy and PFLAG meetings, had read books, and had difficult conversations and genuinely changed. "I'm so proud of her," I'd told Cecilia once, a few years after the divorce. "Is that weird? Being proud of your mother for doing the bare minimum of accepting you?" "It's not weird," Cecilia had said. "It's grace. She didn't have to change. Lots of people never do." Acknowledging that she did, celebrating that growth even though it came later than it should have, that's generous. You're allowed to be proud of her. Dashiell was here too, with his second wife and their teenage daughter. He'd divorced Portia 5 years ago, and his new wife Simone was warm and funny and had immediately embraced our family without any of the awkwardness Portia had carried. Dashiell had apologized, finally, for his silence during those early years, for not standing up for me, for choosing neutrality when the situation demanded taking sides. "I was a coward," he'd admitted over beers during one of their visits. I told myself I was staying out of it, not picking sides, but silence in the face of injustice is its own choice. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry I didn't. It hadn't erased the years of hurt, but it had mattered. We'd rebuilt something, not the close sibling relationship we'd had as kids, but something honest and real. Sloane appeared at my side, sliding an arm around my waist. "Your grandfather wants you," she said. "He's asking for his favorite granddaughter. I'm his only granddaughter," I pointed out. "That's what makes you his favorite," Sloane said with a grin. I walked over to where Grandpa Sterling sat surrounded by admirers. At 100 years old, he'd slowed down physically, but remained sharp mentally, still telling jokes and sharing wisdom, and occasionally dropping bombshells about family history that made everyone question what else he'd kept secret for decades. "There she is," he said as I approached, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Come sit with your old grandfather. I want to tell you something." I settled onto the arm of his chair, and he took my hand in his skin papery thin, but his grip still strong. "You know what the best decision of my life was?" he asked. "Meeting Grandma?" I guessed. Besides that, he said, standing up to your father at that dinner 10 years ago, refusing to let him do to you what my Margaret did to Cecilia. I spent too many years being a coward, Fallon, letting my wife drive away our daughter, choosing comfort over courage, telling myself it wasn't my battle to fight. But that night, when I heard what your parents were planning, I decided I was done being a coward. I was going to stand up for what was right even if it cost me everything. You gave up your home, I said quietly. Your relationship with Dad, your comfortable life in Connecticut. That wasn't nothing. It was exactly nothing compared to what I gained, Grandpa Sterling said firmly. These last 10 years in Vermont, living near family who actually loves each other, watching you and Sloane build your life together, meeting my great-grandchildren, seeing Cecilia finally get the family celebration she deserved after decades of exile. This has been the happiest time of my life, Fallon, all because I finally found the courage to do the right thing. You taught me that courage, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You showed me it was possible to stand up to family, to choose authenticity over approval, to build something new when the old foundations were rotten. I don't know where I'd be without that example. You'd be exactly where you are, Grandpa Sterling said, because you've always had that strength in you. I just gave you permission to use it. You did the hard work yourself, you and Sloane both. Mateo came running over, his face sticky with cake frosting, demanding that great-grandpa Sterling tell the story about the time he accidentally set his dorm room on fire in college. Sage was right behind him, adding her own requests for stories, and I watched my grandfather light up, launching into a tale I'd heard a dozen times but never tired of. These children who existed because of choices made, and stands taken, and courage found in unexpected moments. Later, as the party wound down and the sun set over the mountains in shades of orange and pink, the family that had gathered to celebrate posed for photos. Multiple generations, biological and chosen, all of us connected by love and stubbornness, and the refusal to let prejudice define our boundaries. Everyone say, family, the photographer called out. Family, we chorused, and the camera captured us. Complicated, messy, broken and rebuilt, but unmistakably together. That night, after we'd put the twins to bed and collapsed onto our couch in exhausted contentment, Sloane pulled out her phone and showed me something. Look what I found, she said, from 10 years ago, the night of the ambush dinner. It was a photo I'd forgotten existed. Me and Sloane standing outside my parents' house after everything had fallen apart, before we'd met Cecilia, when we'd thought we were facing family rejection alone. We looked young and scared and defiant, holding hands like we were anchoring each other against a storm. We had no idea what was coming, I said, studying our younger faces. We knew enough, Sloane said. We knew we had each other, and we knew we weren't going to let anyone separate us. Everything else, Cecilia, Vermont, your mom's change, building this whole life, that all came from standing firm in that moment. Do you ever regret it? I asked. Coming to that dinner, walking into the ambush, everything that came after? Never, Sloane said firmly. That night was hard, and the years after had their challenges, but it gave us this life, this family, these kids, this community. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Me too, I said, and meant it completely. The ambush dinner had been meant to shame me, to pressure me into hiding who I was, to drive a wedge between me and the woman I loved. Instead, it had connected me with family I didn't know existed, had sparked changes that rippled through multiple generations, had ultimately brought more love into my life than I'd ever imagined possible. My family had planned to ambush me, but my grandfather had other plans. And those other plans had changed everything, not just for me, but for my mother who'd found courage to leave an unhealthy marriage, for Cecilia who'd finally gotten the family reunion she'd been denied for decades, for Dashiell who'd learned to stand up for what was right, for Sloane who'd gained an entire extended family, for our children who would grow up surrounded by love and acceptance. One moment of courage, one old man refusing to let history repeat itself, one decision to stand firm in the face of prejudice, and the trajectory of multiple lives had shifted. That's what I'd tell Mateo and Sage someday, when they were old enough to understand, that their family existed because people made hard choices, because love won out over fear, because sometimes standing up for what's right costs everything, and gives back even more. And I'd tell them about their great-grandfather Sterling, who at 86 years old found the courage he'd lacked decades earlier, who chose love over comfort and family over pride, who showed all of us what it meant to truly stand up for the people you love. He lived to 100, long enough to see the family he'd helped repair flourish and grow. Long enough to know that his moment of courage had mattered, had changed everything, had built a legacy of love that would extend far beyond his years. And when we buried him a year later, surrounded by the family he'd fought for, the eulogy I gave was simple. He taught us that it's never too late to do the right thing. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. That family is both who we're born to and who we choose, and sometimes the choosing matters more. He saved us, all of us, by refusing to stand silent when silence would have been easier. And because of that, we're all here today. Complicated and messy and beautifully, undeniably family. That was his legacy. That was what one moment of standing firm had built. And that was more than enough.